Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mr. O'Brien here, World War II Unit Review. The little artist seeks a big canvas. Gentlemen, wow, where do you start with this? Wow. Well, let's start at the beginning. Adolf Hitler, as a young man, had dreams of being a great artist. He studied architecture. He loved culture. He went to the opera as a teenager. Who does that, right? If he would have had his way, his whole life would have been completely absorbed by studying the great masters, and he literally loved looking at things like Athens, Rome, Constantinople, right? His dream was to become the world's greatest architect or artist. In fact, when he became the Fuhrer, he was actually designing models of a new Berlin called Germania, which would be not only the greatest city in Germany, but the greatest city in civilization. But you know, as we talked about in lecture, twice he was turned down by the Vienna School of Art. He could get past the entrance examination for drawing buildings, but his figures, they did not believe he had the talent. How different the world would have been if he was able to get into the Vienna School of Art. But that was not the world's fate. You know, it's interesting. I did read Mein Kampf, and I must say that it was a complicated book. I did not find it entertaining in the least, but it did lay out a master plan to basically evolve Germany into one of the greatest empires of history. Now, did Hitler plan this as a young man? I don't know, but I think he was more of an opportunist. And as these opportunities came forth, he was able to push his agenda to the forefront. And what was that agenda? Very simply put, excuse me, man. He wanted to speed up evolution. He wanted Germany to get rid of everyone that he considered to be a problem, weak, the mentally retarded, the criminally insane, the socialist, the Jews, who he scapegoat for everything, immigrants, you name it, right? He wanted Germany only for the Germans. He was hoping to produce a master race of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans. Yes, I do know that he was not pure-blooded. He admitted that. He was only 50% Aryan. He knew that he was brown-eyed, brown hair, and he knew it was going to take time for Germany to purify itself from outside races, what he called the Tower of Babel. And you know, it's interesting to me, you could still believe, I think it was 1/32 Jewish, and still be a member of the elite Schutzstaffel, the dreaded SS. He was born in Bernau, Germany, Austria, and even though he was Austrian, he considered himself to be German. It's interesting to me that when he was born, right, his ideal home life was anything but ideal. His mother was a 28-year-old peasant that was theoretically related to his father, right? And his father was a 52-year-old, worked for the government. He had a pension. They were not wealthy, but they were definitely comfortable. But the mother was a little bit uneducated, doting, very protective of Hitler, where Alois was very, shall we say, a violent man, and often would punish Hitler with beatings, both with a club, his fist, whatever he had. And through the years, right, Hitler is going to develop a narcissistic personality disorder where he will no longer be able to feel compassion for others. He'll be able to hide his emotions, and he will develop this idea of a superiority complex, that he is destined for greatness, and he becomes frustrated with people who can't see that he is great. Well, you know, his mother died of breast cancer at a very young age. His father also died when Hitler was a teenager of a pulmonary aneurysm. And so at a very young age, Hitler finds himself an orphan, and the only way of making any type of money was patiently waiting for his father's pension to come and to live in the streets as a street artist. Now, we're going to see, as you go through your studies, man, you're going to see this name Schicklgruber, because Hitler may have been an adopted name. The bloodline would suggest the real name was Schicklgruber, and there was an Uncle Hitler. But how Hitler became Hitler is still not known. Now, there were stories of illegitimacy. There were stories that Hitler's dad was actually the product of a relationship between a wealthy Jewish teenager and a German housekeeper. But historians cannot prove this. Historians cannot prove that there was any Jewish blood whatsoever. But it is interesting that when Hitler came to power, he ordered the SS to destroy the cemeteries with artillery where his grandparents were buried. There's a picture of one of Hitler's postcards. I try to imagine that you're 16 years of age and you're homeless. He said that those 5 years were the worst 5 years of his life. He was freezing, hungry, homeless, living under bridges. And it's interesting, when he was able to raise a little bit of money by selling homemade postcards, he often went to the opera to listen to Richard Wagner. You remember The Ride of the Valkyries? Dun, 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 dun. He loved opera. How many young men would starve and give up a meal to go to the opera instead? Now, we don't really know where this hatred came from. I remember reading biographies where some of Hitler's elementary school teachers were very, shall we say, rightist, and they taught the gospel of hatred, especially against foreigners and Jews and socialists and those individuals who could not speak German. Karl Lueger and George von Schroeder, men, these guys were openly very, very popular politicians who absolutely argued with fake science that there was an international Jewish conspiracy designed not only to take over Germany, but to take over the world through banking. Interesting idea, but unfortunately we don't have enough time today to go through all that. When Hitler was in the military, he was drafted by the Austrian army and he refused to go. I don't want to fight in an army that allows Jews and allows Slavic people. Slavic people are basically Russians, that's Eastern Europe. And it's interesting because if you look at the record, when he went into the German army and the Austrian army forgave him, he always said that he didn't see any Jews at the front. Sometime, if you get a chance, Google the number of Jews who fought for the imperial service of Kaiser Wilhelm and were awarded the Iron Cross. Speaking of the Iron Cross, Hitler was awarded the Knight's Cross, the Iron Cross, in 1918. He was wounded twice in the war, once in an artillery attack, but the poison gas attack at the end of the war was the one that left permanent damage to Hitler. He did not die, obviously, but his health was compromised. So his war buddies said that Hitler was brave, dutiful, dedicated. He actually told everybody that he loved the war, and it was the only time he ever felt comfortable. When the war ended, it had a psychological effect on Hitler. Once again, he had no direction. There's that famous picture that they found the day that Austria-Hungary declares war and the Russians and the whole powder keg of the Balkans explodes. And there's this photograph of Hitler on the first day of the war. Crazy. Remember, Hitler always used that term, the November criminals. Those people in the government, Jewish industrialists, bankers, and others who betrayed the German army by surrendering on November 11th, 1918. The Germans always argued, the Nazis argued, how did we lose this war when not a single inch of the fatherland was ever invaded by foreign troops? Well, the truth was, he's right. The Nazis are right. It was the English Navy that boycotted the German seaports and brought starvation to the German nation. Like Napoleon Bonaparte said, an army runs on its stomach, and the British Navy was strangling Germany by blockading its seaports. No food. All right? It's interesting because when he goes to Munich, which is in South Germany, right, he's going to become a spy for the it's the Weimar Republic, kind of, but it's actually the Free Corps, that radical right group that wants to bring back the old days and are very afraid that the communists are going to solidify their hold on the government. So he becomes a spy for the German National Workers' Party, run by a locksmith by the name of Anton Drexler. Guys, I think there's more people in the cafeteria during senior lunch than there are in the Nazi party at this time. They said his Nazi membership was 7, but he saw something here. He believed that he could take this rightist group and he could mold them into his own image and use them to conquer not only Munich, but Berlin, and bring down the Reichstag and the Reichsrat, that's the House of Representatives, the Senate, and take over the Weimar Republic. It was a crazy idea, but he was quite an orator. He didn't know how to speak properly. He got a coach, and when he began to give these fiery speeches, his popularity grew. In the end, he gets rid of Drexler, Anton Drexler, and all the Nazis who don't want to use his racial policy of building a new, greater Germany. Now, Hitler is going to use violence. He believes that revolution will get him to get the government. And this group known as the SA, all right, the brown shirts, are nothing but thugs, led by Ernst Röhm. Ernst Röhm will be Hitler's best friend in the rise to power, but they're gangsters. They're brawling their way to greatness. That was their motto. They beat up or murdered anybody that got in their way. Newspaper writers, critics, Jewish businessmen, Germans wouldn't cooperate, right? But the idea of violence didn't work. And later Hitler will turn on his buddy Ernst Röhm and literally murder this giant army of troublemakers. Murder them. It was called the Night of the Long Knives. And Ernst Röhm, who thought he was going to be the leader of the new Nazi army, was also murdered and betrayed by Hitler after Hitler used him to rise to power. Later, Hitler's new army will be called the SS. We saw that fantastic movie. We talked about the Nazi idea of ideology and purity through fight songs and culture clubs. And Hitler adapts the swastika. Now remember, the swastika has been around forever. This one points from left to right. The one that the Hindus used and the Buddhists used points in the other direction. But Hitler was fascinated by archaeology, the origin of races, mysticism, and he was also a little bit into the occult. Yes, he did study horoscopes. As we talked about, right? The Nazis did not invent this insignia. They stole it. They absolutely positively stole it. They did. And remember, Hitler was told the German people, he was very open about this. Very, very open. I need you to give me your freedom. Give up on democracy, it won't work. Totalitarianism, the way to go. Fascism. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one leader, one government. And to facilitate the recovery of the 1920s and the terrible stock market crash, which totally annihilated Germany, he had the Porsche brothers come together and they designed something called the People's Car, the Volkswagen. He did. He told them, give me your freedom and your loyalty, and I'll give you economic wealth. He virtually wiped out unemployment. Gentlemen, in the 60s, I had 2 Volkswagens, and they were great little cars. They really were. So people began to believe that Hitler was some sort of messiah. All right? But then he went too far. Hitler, in a very poorly designed beer hall putsch, that's when he took one of the drinking clubs we used to meet here, took all his radical right friends. And remember, Hitler was a reactionary. He didn't want to change Germany. He thought Germany was perfect. It just needed to be purified. And he marched on Munich. But unfortunately, not all members of the army and the local militia believed the Nazis were the way to go. It was not a bloodbath, it was definitely a skirmish where one of Hitler's leaders, Hermann Göring, took a bullet in the groin, the man who created the Air Force, the Luftwaffe, and later became a drug addict the rest of his Nazi days because of the pain that he received in the shootings and this riot, the beer hall putsch. One of Hitler's followers actually took a bullet for him and died, and Hitler was injured, but it was a very minor injury. Now he's going to get sentenced to jail. It should have been the end of it. Treason should have been his life. But men, he's going to be sentenced to 5 years and only serve 9 months. Now this is confusing. Some biographers say 5 months, others say 9. I believe that it is 9 months. But while he was there, it was discovered that the judge that sent him there was pro-Nazi. That's how he was able to avoid a life sentence. And quite frankly, the guards at Landsberg prison believed that Hitler was a superstar, and they gave him every privilege. He was even allowed to bring in his secretary, and he was able to sit down and write his book in prison called Mein Kampf. And now, Mein Kampf didn't do very well when it first sold. I don't think it sold 5,000 copies, But you know what? When he became Fuhrer in 1933, it made him a millionaire overnight. That book is still available on Amazon today. I can't believe it. All right? So he goes from a Democrat to a dictator. Now, later, guys, he's going to realize something. He's going to realize that he cannot use violence to get into the government. He's going to have to do it legally through the ballot box. And once he gets into the ballot box and he's able to get into the government, he can dismantle democracy and bring fascism, militarism, right? The idea of glorifying the military, glorifying the people, and glorifying one leader. And he did a very good job of that. Now, men, I don't recommend you read this book unless you're really into history, because quite frankly, I found it to be rambling. But if you study it closely, it lays out his plan, especially the idea of Lebensraum, that Germany needs living space. He openly tells that he's going to take Poland and Russia and other countries, convert their people into farming slaves, and have enough food stocks to build a 1,000-year Reich and to build the world's greatest army. All right? Now, there's Rudolf Hess, the famous World War I aviator that was his secretary in prison and also secretary of the party. Now, men, you have to know this word Lebensraum. I'm not really sure if Rudolf Hess didn't really write that book. He may have ghostwrote it. Rudolf Hess was absolutely in love with the Fuhrer, and it's interesting because Hess was a very, very wealthy man. Later, without permission, he's going to fly to England, and he's going to crash land his airplane and try to set up a conversation with the King and Queen of England and their family about stopping World War II from happening, because Hitler was very saddened by the fact that Winston Churchill would not let Hitler have Europe. He didn't want to fight England. He believed that the Anglos and the Saxons were the second greatest race of evolution behind the Aryans and the Caucasus Mountains, the Caucasus, the Caucasians. All right. Now, we talked about this thing here. If you had more, this class was a year long, but we could really go into a lot of detail. But unfortunately, it's not. But that's okay. There's the Schutzstaffel. They replaced the SA, the SS. All right? Loyalty was my honor. There's the double lightning bars. Men, every concentration camp and death camp and work camp was run by the SS. Now, if this is not on this test, it'll be on a future test. All members of the death camps were volunteers. No member of the SS was forced to work in a death camp or a labor camp against his wishes. And you ready for this? There had no shortage of volunteers to eliminate the enemies of the Reich, especially the Jews. Men, the economy was absolutely terrible. When America's economy fell apart in 1929, Germany got it worse because they were still paying back war retributions to the Allies, right? So that's how Hitler is going to use his oratory skills in talking about the economy, right? He's going to do his absolutely positively best to make every German feel that if he gets elected to chancellor, that he will eliminate unemployment. That's what he talked about, and everybody forgets that. It's the economy, the economy, the economy. And he was able to blame uncontrolled immigration to Germany on the worsening economy, on skilled laborers who were coming in that the Germans didn't want to compete with them. Boy, it's kind of funny how things haven't changed, huh? But I digress. So remember, man, it just wasn't the idea of racial purity. It was the economy. That's a big part of how the Nazis got into power. All right. Now, I think that's going to wrap up, so make sure we didn't miss anything here. All right. I think we're in good shape. And, all right. Good luck. Hey, this is a great movie. You get a chance to watch it. It's 2 parts, and it's the best. It's about 97% accurate. It's a great profile on how Hitler's early days may have affected the way he looked at the world. All right. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this video. And also remember, the PowerPoint's up, and some people like to use the PowerPoints instead of the videos to study for the test. And I'm cool with that. Any questions at all, please reach out. I'm always happy to take your questions. Have a great day, men.